Welcome to the Franchise Secrets Podcast with your host, Eric Van Horn, and my friend, Jori Hayes. And Jori's she's done a lot of cool things in franchising. And so I'm going to just kick it over to her and let her tell you what she's done. But the topic for today is Discovery Day. She sent me an email a while back that said, "Hey, Eric, let's talk about Discovery Day." I'm like, well, let's talk about that raw on the podcast. And so here we are, not really prepared or prepped at all. So you all get it raw and authentic. Everything around a Discovery Day. I know Jori's been to Discovery Days. She's in different roles. And so, Jori, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are, your background?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Good to be here with you. So my background really started in franchising. I accidentally walked into a fitness franchise, and the area representative happened to be there. And we started talking, and that was really the start. And so from there, I've been a part of rolling out regions.
You want to give a little bit more specifics into that, or do you not want to?
It's up to you. I
do want to.
You want more specifics? Okay, sure. So that franchise was Orange Theory Fitness. And so I met the area representative for Orange Theory Fitness, Colorado, back in the very beginning, really, of Orange Theory Fitness. So there were less than 10 studios open in the world at that time. Now they're in.
Wow. It was that early on that you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So super early on in the concept. There weren't many roles in place. It was the beginning of a franchise. So the franchisor didn't have as many things in place to support.
Let's be honest. Like, they probably didn't have hardly anything in place. I mean, they came from franchising experience, but an emerging brand is an emerging brand. I mean, like, compare opening up one like number 11 to like whatever it is now. It's probably night and day difference. Wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. And I think, that's something interesting that you say, because when I tell people when they're looking for a franchise and when they're talking to franchisors, there's different benefits of coming in at different times. Certainly there were benefits back then, and I loved every aspect of it. But yeah, you don't have as many things in place, good and bad. Have more freedom, but a little bit more legwork.
And you just have to know that. I mean, anytime you get into an emerging brand, and this goes into our Discovery Day conversation, because you go into a Discovery Day at, let's call it Regis, the massive hair company out there. They have, Supercuts and all of those. You go to their Discovery Day, and I mean, it's impressive because they have endless amounts of money. And you're going to get that sense when you go in there. When you go into an emerging brand, Orange Theory, when they had 10, or brand whatever it is, when they have 3 or 10 or even 15, it's a different feel. And so you just have to have the right expectations going into it. And there are advantages when you are early in. One of them's territory.
Oh, yeah, obviously. No doubt.
And what are some of the other advantages or disadvantages that you see in emerging brands?
Yeah, well, I think advantages, especially for visionaries, and you and I have been talking about that lately too. But in that aspect, there's a lot more wiggle room in the beginning of a brand. So if you see an opportunity, it's more likely that you're going to be able to put it in place or launch something that you want to see in your business. If that doesn't sound appealing to somebody, then they shouldn't do a new brand. Right.
That's exactly it, because I mean, that's, early on in a brand, you're a little bit more entrepreneurial. You want to do things and create things. And that's how great brands go from an emerging brand to a great brand, is they learn things from their franchisees. And I'm sure, was there anything interesting that you guys learned, or franchisees in Orange Theory that created some things, and now that's kind of standard operating procedure within Orange Theory?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think one of the things that we did really well in Colorado was actually set up the regional setup. So having regional operation team, regional fitness team, that wasn't something that was part of the area representatives FDD. That wasn't a part of it. So you really had freedom to roll out however you wanted. And we put some structure in place on, how to have a strong AR and how to roll out the different stores from 0 to 29.
So did Orange Theory at that time, were you guys doing Discovery Days? Was it done locally in Colorado with the ARs, which is area representatives, or were they done at the corporate office, or was there no such thing as a Discovery Day?
No, yeah. So Orange Theory Orange Theory is just such a strong brand, and the people that started it are so amazing. They did Discovery Day from corporate from the beginning. I was not a part of that. The ARs for Colorado came in, or went to Discovery Day, and they've got the best stories of what that first Discovery Day looked like. It definitely was not what you spoke to earlier, but yeah. So they did. In terms of finding franchisees in Colorado, it was really organic. Yeah.
Well, let's flip the script now. Why don't you start asking me some questions around Discovery Day? I mean, like, you as someone that is interested in buying a franchise, and I know that you've been there and not just once. And then you help people that are in that franchising journey from a franchisor to a franchisee or whatever. So why don't you, like, if you have some questions to ask me, the guy I built sales teams. And I've developed sales processes for franchisors, and so I'm the guy that developed Discovery Days for some of them that had extreme growth, and I've been around some of the best people that are in franchise sales, and I've seen some of the best Discovery Days out there that people are doing. So you have an opportunity to ask me some questions. I have an opportunity to share this with you and everybody else out there that is thinking about going to a Discovery Day. Yeah. So I'm handing the show over to you.
Cool.
I might have to take it back if you mess it up.
I'll tread lightly. Yeah. So I guess my first question then would be, if you're talking to somebody who's looking at a franchise and starting to get more serious with them or not, at what point do you recommend they go to a Discovery Day? Early in the relationship, farther down?
I think it's further down the relationship. Some people see Discovery Day, some franchisors, when I say people, some franchisors see Discovery Day as another time for the candidate or the prospect or the person looking at buying the franchise as a place to get more information. And I don't like Discovery Days like that very much, because I want people to get a lot and basically all of their information gathering and due diligence and everything done before they get to Discovery Day, or the vast majority of it. So Discovery Day is much more relational, much more you getting a gut feel for how things are between you and them. It is making sure that you gel. It is looking at it from that angle versus like, I need to work on this piece of the budget now, or I got this piece of information now. Now I need to figure out how it works with something else. All of that stuff is part of the due diligence process that should be done way before you get to Discovery Day. Now, in terms of like when somebody should start looking at the Discovery Day, I think, typically a brand has one Discovery Day a month, and you should really start looking at that Discovery Day after you've had a couple calls with the franchisor, and typically the first call with the franchisor is all around the brand. It's a brand overview, so you need that brand overview call to have context for everything else that you are going to learn throughout the process. Next, a typical phone call and a typical sales process is a unit economics call, where you might get some type of Excel spreadsheet where it's a model to help you build your pro forma, and you might not get that. You're going to take that with the item 19, the stuff that you get within the franchise disclosure document, if they have some numbers for you to plug into that into your own pro forma. But there's a call, that second call is really around the financials. And if you have the brand overview call, you have that financial call, and you're like, this is going well, and it's probably and then you set up a third call or a webinar with that franchisor. At that point, you should probably find out when the next Discovery Day is, because it might be a month out, and that way you can just do it from a planning standpoint. So let's say it's a month out, and now you are 6 weeks into the due diligence process. You can collapse in week number number 4 through 6 the rest of the due diligence process. Unless you're really lazy and you're really not wanting to do it, then you probably shouldn't be buying a franchise if you can't devote that much time to it. But you can only do so much due diligence too, right? I mean, there's only so much that you can do. Jori, remember when I said like, hey, this is the signal, like, stop talking.
You want me to use it?
I was going to do that to you, but you can certainly do that.
Oh, good. I was about to, and I was like, no, I'll keep going. Because actually, I'd love to go back to, let's talk about item 19 a little bit. And specifically, I think when you're speaking with someone looking at a franchise, obviously, hopefully they're very aware of what kind of financials are going to support them and what kind of operating budget they're looking at, monthly budget they're looking at. But what are some red flags for you in an item 19? Because that's
I don't believe a whole lot of item 19. What's that?
That might be a whole podcast.
Yeah, that is a whole podcast. That's going to be podcast number like 19 for us. I can see this is like the Jori Eric series, doing deep dives into everything. So everyone that is like a listener to this show knows that I'm super raw and I try to bring truth because there's so much misinformation, people are misleading. There's misconceptions out there. And I think one of the big things is around the item 19 and I'm glad that franchisors put that in there, but it can be so misleading. And a franchisor, I've seen them where they are just extremely misleading. I mean, massively misleading. They're true, but it's based on a small sample size.
Sure. And you mean, when you say misleading, you mean that it's under...
Well, let's just use like no brands, just complete random example. Let's say there's an item 19 that shows $1 million in average unit volume. And then you're talking to franchisees out there and that off of AUV, average unit volume, they're netting or EBITDA or free cash flow 20% or 30% off of that. So you're looking at you're taking some of the brands that have been, some of the locations that have been open for 7 years, and they're in the top third quartile or the top 25 quartile. And you all of a sudden take that compared to what you're hearing over here and on net profit percentages, and you're marrying the two, and they have no business being married because one of them may have been bought out from a mom and pop or converted over and they had a bunch of revenue to begin with, and you don't really know how that mixes in there. So there's just so many things that can be misleading. Now, on the flip side, I know franchises that feel like they have really solid item 19s. And from a skeptic like me, I would be like, this is not really correct. There's probably something hidden in there. And as a matter of fact, there wasn't. There's some, like, it's very few and far between, but there wasn't anything hidden in there. And they actually toned down the numbers because they didn't want to seem like they were misleading anybody. And you only find that out once you're on the inside. You don't really know it until you're deep into the brand. Mm-hmm. But so the point of all that is when I see an item 19, I use that as just a general guide. I don't put a whole lot of weight into it. What you do with that is you validate it. You're like, okay, this shows $1 million AUV. My assumption is I can do that my first year. And you go talk to somebody and you're like, what do you think if I budget $1 million at AUV my first year or my second year? Am I being realistic here, or am I, being too optimistic? So if you phrase it that way to somebody that you're validating with, that's when you're going to find out. And all you care about if it's likely or not. You don't care about why it's not unlikely necessarily, but you just need to find that out and start validating it. So the point of all that is you take the item 19, you validate that with your assumptions with franchisees. And it's important to put your assumptions in there and validate it with franchisees. It's because that way they understand the context that you're coming from.
Right. And so I think you spoke.
That was a long-winded answer.
There's a lot of goodness in there. And I think you spoke to two things that, I definitely recommend. one, validated with other franchisees. So that takes me to two places really to discuss. One, I think it's so important that they do find other franchisees and travel if there's not one in their state, go into another location, look at those things. But let's talk about what happens if they're early on in the concept.
It's not always possible, though. It's
yes.
not always possible. Okay, go ahead.
So if it's early on in the concept, or then what? If you don't really have any way to validate, what does that look like?
Validation's so tricky. Let's say that. I mean, you've seen it. I mean, especially in brands that are growing fast, and there's legitimate thundering hooves. People are buying it all around you, and that's legitimate. You don't know if you go and visit somebody in your market or even outside of your market, you go visit them, they know now that you're looking, right? And they've been on the fence of whether they buy that market or not, and they can buy it before you. And word travels fast in a franchise system. Even though how sneaky or tricky you think you are, like, people kind of know. And this isn't always the case, but I've seen it happen. And I've worked with people as a consultant that that they've had territory bought out from under them by an existing franchisee because they.
It happened to me. Yes. I shared too much.
I shouldn't be laughing. I should be like, I'm sorry.
You can learn. I mean, that's great for people to know.
We'll learn from you. Now I'm going to flip the script. Tell me about your thing.
Yeah, I learned the hard way that you do have to keep some things very close to pocket and aware. And I got a little too friendly with another franchisee, and and he my business partner and I were on just real close to 2 territories, and then all of a sudden those 2 territories were gone. Yep. So we made it work, and we found 2 other ones. But it's a good point that because it
really does happen. And the problem is you don't know when you're getting sold like that, because you could be talking to a franchisor where they know their franchisees are not happy. And so they could be using that as a sales technique. Like, hey, you probably don't want to do this because they might buy it. And they know full well this person's not happy and they're not going to do that, but you're just getting sold. I think that's the hardest thing for people to know, when they're getting sold and when they're getting good information from somebody. Even consultants like me, there's a lot of consultants that do what I do and help people find good brands, but they're selling. And I just told someone the other day, you probably shouldn't buy because you're on a plane to, different countries all the time. You probably need to find a manager with equity. And he didn't have the time to even do that. So you need to find someone that you need to know who you can trust and who you can't. And that just comes with, I think, time and just diving deeper into every aspect of the franchise, and just getting multiple people that have influence in your life to speak truth and that you trust. So don't go ask your uncle who doesn't know anything about business or franchising, like if you should do something, or someone that, you need to talk to people that are in it, like in franchising, and whether they've done well or they haven't, they probably have some opinion. So like, I like to research stuff like that myself. I go out and I seek advice from people that are doing better than me. They've been further along than me, because I know myself, I'm probably one of the better consultants out there, but I think what makes me really good is I understand that I don't know everything. And, something may look like it's semi-absentee and really not as semi-absentee as you think. You got to learn from that. I'm learning from that. Like, every year I'm buying different things and getting involved with it. And I'm always learning. I'm learning in partnerships. And so you just, not everything out there is what it appears.
Yeah. And I think
I'm kicking it back to you now.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take it. I think we started down a little path there that maybe will take us back to Discovery Day. And that was, sometimes you can't go to another franchisee. So maybe this is when you do go to Discovery Day. You've started to dig into steps 1 and 2 that you said earlier. And then I'd love to hear from you. What are the top 3 or 4 questions that you go to the CFO at Discovery Day, or anybody in the financials department and you dig a little more, what questions are you asking them? Because I think that's a person you want to find.
Well, I don't know. Emerging brands probably don't even have like a CFO type person. Like, where I get most of my advice from is, or my due diligence, I'd rather talk to a franchisee than a CFO. I'd rather talk to a franchisee than a CEO. I'd rather talk to a franchisee than myself, because that they're doing it. And here's something like, most people don't know the questions to ask. Heck, I didn't know a lot of the right questions to ask. And I continually get better at it. And I think you need to know, it all comes back to your financial model, but there's a lot of things that make that financial model work or not work. So even on paper, that financial model may look like you're making a ton of money, but it may come at if it's got a very thin if the margins are thin or slim, and there's a large labor component to the business, that you have to be really good at managing labor. And if you're not that good, and that means telling people you got to go home, you're not getting enough hours this week because we don't have enough customers coming in this week. And if that's the model, tough. You need to be, and you need to find that out by talking to franchisees. Like, why are they successful? Why are they having this certain margin? And are other people having this type of margin, whatever that margin is? And what are the secrets or the keys to getting that type of margin? And then if it's like, if the secret is, you just got to be a good salesperson, and you are that good salesperson, or you got to be a good marketer and you are that good marketer, or you have someone that can be, then that's a good thing. If it's like, you've got to run tight operations because this business is built around like controlling cost. And if that's the model, and that's why these franchisees are successful, and you're a marketer or a salesperson, that's probably not going to be a great one for you to get involved with unless you have that person as a partner.
Sure. Yeah. So it sounds like what we're saying is, before you go to discovery day, you need to get really serious with yourself on what your strengths are, what you're able to do, and what you're not able to do. And then next steps, if you're looking for a partner, and then what strengths do they have? Or, if you need to find another franchise.
Absolutely. And so, because when you get to discovery day, like I was saying earlier, like, this is the time to make a decision. It's also, call it a decision day. Discovery day is kind of the older term. It's current, but older. Some franchisors are going to saying it's a decision day, and that's really what it is. And the mentality of going into it is, you're probably not going to learn anything. We've already said that. And you're just going to make sure that you validated everything that you thought you learned. Mm-hmm. And so you're doing that. And at the end of it, you need to, like, when you're leaving the hotel or you're flying home, you need to know in your gut whether you're going to do this or not. There might be a few things here and there that you need to get checked off, like, do I need an extra little bit of territory over here, or what about this? Sure. But you need to know, like, I'm a go. If they approve me, I'm wanting to do this. I think another misconception is prospective franchisees think the franchisor is just trying to sell them. There's a lot of brands that are just trying to sell. Yeah. And they will take your money no matter how, successful you may or may not be. They want that. There's also other brands out there that they are looking at you as much, sometimes more than you're looking at them. Even if they really need you as one of their first 10 or 20 franchisees, they also know that their base of their first 10 or 20 franchisees is critical to their next major milestone. So you are going to either get approved or denied by the better franchisors out there. And let's say you're approved, you need to be ready, within days after discovery day, once you find out if they want you or not, whether you're going to say yes or no. And there's a couple things to this. Is this a sales technique to drive you to a decision? Absolutely. Because if you are just if there's no deadline to a decision, then you will probably not make a decision because that's kind of human nature. So they know that. So there is a sales technique in that, but also at the same time, good franchisors know that franchisees that tend to be successful are good at making decisions. And that's a macro decision. That's a bigger decision to say, yes, I'm going to do this. But even saying yes is a micro decision. It's a small decision because you're not signing. Once you sign agreements and you wire funds, that's the big decision. But just saying, yes, I'm in, let's get these few things taken care of. That's a small decision, but it really is moving in the right direction. And if someone can't do that, then that means 99% of the time, they probably shouldn't do that particular franchise because something's wrong, or maybe they're not meant for franchise ownership. And so I like it when there is a deadline for a decision to be made of like, yep, let's do this, or no, I'm out, versus like, let me think about it some more, because you need to get your stuff done, your due diligence done, and then move forward. I think, and I've seen it on the other, and I do it through my process as people are going through my process of discovering different brands, and if it's right for them. There's stages that they have to go through before they even get presented a brand. If they are not taking action after action and doing what they say they're going to do, I know that they're probably not very likely to actually buy a franchise at the end of the day. And that's okay with me, because I know not everybody's meant to be a business owner. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with working for somebody. And it may just be the timing that's not right too. But I clearly see it. These decisions that people make along the way culminates in a decision to buy or not buy, and there's a deadline attached to it, whether it's an actual deadline or it's a self-imposed deadline that you and the franchisor decide together. Stick to that deadline, make the decision, and either move forward or don't.
Yeah, I think you even see it in the amount of time it takes for someone to reply to an email around some of those decisions. Sometimes for me, that's that's a sign as well.
Absolutely.
And I think you spoke to I think I heard it this way because I believe that you should be picky with what kind of franchisees you bring on as a franchisor. And I will say that the area representatives of Colorado for Orange Theory, that's something that they did so well. And I saw that early on, and they were intentional, and they slowly brought on franchisees and they looked at their background and what have they done. And then they also looked at their values. And that's something that I was going to speak to, that I think when you go to a discovery day, speaking with the key players for the franchisor, what are they? Do they match up with the values that you've heard of the franchise, and does that mesh?
That's and it goes back to me when I start working with people right away, because I see what their values are and what they're not. And different franchisors, same industry, different brands, different values. Doesn't make it right or wrong, but the right person in there, if it's got a real family atmosphere to it, and someone wants that, or they're just hardcore sales, they want that, or they just want to be a part of that emerging brand where they can create and control things, or they are that type of person that want something super rigid and they just need to follow that, or they don't want something rigid. So, you don't know that until you are 6 weeks into due diligence, and then you're not even sure. I know this stuff because I see these brands, and I have friends on the inside. So I try to help people get to that right fit from a culture standpoint and values and purpose and all of that. But now it's time to really, it goes back to your question. At the end of the day, you are at Discovery Day and you think this company matches up with your core values and what you're wanting in a franchise or partnership. And you absolutely, you even before Discovery Day, you start talking to the franchisees about that. You don't ask them, is this their core value? And are they, is it legit? But you start to understand things, and you have to start picking up on things intuitively to know. Like, I know some franchisors that have done incredible things for their franchisees. Like they paid for rent, they paid for remodel. It was not part of the franchise agreement. It was not part of anything, but they did it. They gave money money to franchisees that were behind in their development plan because they wanted them to open up. And they're like, if you get a lease signed within X amount of time, we'll give you $30,000 or $20,000. I mean, things like that. And then I've also seen franchisors on the flip side. If you don't open up on the day that you're supposed to, we're going to terminate that territory. And so there's values in a franchisor, and the written and unwritten code of ethics is extremely important. And you get that by talking to franchisees. But then that's why you just got to go with your gut on some of this. At Discovery Day, you're having meals with them, you're interacting, just talk normal to them. That's why I don't like Discovery Days, like the absolute like learning and trying to get more information. It's like, it's relational. It's like have your, your EQ, the emotional intelligence, and start to read people and engage with people. And here's another thing I think, Jori, don't be standoffish. Don't go into it with your arms crossed thinking I'm going to get them in a gotcha moment here, because they are not like that. There might be some franchisors that you would want to be like that with. And that's the case. You don't want to have anything to do with them. Most franchises, if you're like that, they're like, this is how we're starting our marriage, our partnership, this is how we're starting out. Like, you're going to try to get me in a gotcha. Like, I've been at Discovery Days as a leader of a Discovery Day, and I've seen those people, and the internal conversations after that and during the meeting are like, this guy would be a disaster as a franchisee because it's only going to get worse from there. So your posture, how you go into a Discovery Day, you need to be going in there with excitement and enjoying it and being relational, so they get to know who you are. Because they're looking at, we hear it all the time. They're looking at you as much as you're looking at them. And there's a lot of truth to that. So that's my comment there.
Yeah, no, there's so much goodness in that. And I really agree with it. I think it's important that, you're matching up and you're being honest with what you're feeling. But I think that's such good advice for people going into a Discovery Day, potential franchisees, when, to just get involved and talk to people and ask the questions. And then also, I think, talk to the other folks that are also there, Discovery Day, and what have they learned and who have they talked to, and because those might end up being your biggest allies. Yep.
And you can look in there and you can see the person with their arms crossed, and you can be thinking someone, and you're like, I don't think I would want them as my neighbor. And sometimes you'll find out like they did not get approved. Like they just did not get approved. And you put on your hat as like, I'm the franchisor, and looking at everybody through that lens, you start to see things differently, and you start to see the people like, yeah, I probably wouldn't want them. But I think the other thing is with other people there at a Discovery Day is you want to be in a room of people that are like you, kind of the same level of sophistication, the same, place in life, not age or anything like that. But like, if you're shelling out $1 million for a franchise, you don't want to be in a room full of people that, have $100,000 net worth, because you're like, something's not adding up here. So I've been at Discovery Days where like, I'm the dumbest person in the room. I'm like, I am that guy that they don't want to be like.
I was like, that's great, Eric. You always want to, that's amazing to be in that room.
It is. And I like to put myself in, I put myself in rooms like that. I purposely do that. But and then all of a sudden you get comfortable in that room. And it just happened to me this year. I got comfortable in a certain place that I am. I just pushed myself a couple of weeks ago to level up and to get into a different room of people that I'm certainly not, like, I'm not at their level at all. Some of them I am, but the majority I'm not. But, same thing with you. Like, you kind of want to be the guy or the girl that is, thinking there's a lot of players around here. These guys are really successful. That's probably a good thing. If you are that smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room.
Yeah. It kind of goes both ways. And I think something too that you and I both really believe in, but that we've been alluding to and haven't specifically said is, if the franchise doesn't light you up and the opportunity just doesn't make you feel like I have to do this, for whatever reason, for, emotional reason, for what kind of impact it makes, for financial reasons, whatever, it's probably time to turn around. You got to have a fire.
You only have so much time. And it's like, where are you putting your time? And so, I think that's 100% correct. But I think the thing that people need to think about is it's not, there's different challenges through the journey of franchising. And I've talked to a lot of people about this in the past. Like, you need to know when you should just cut ties, and maybe you should cut ties like right after Discovery Day, and saying no is the right decision.
Right.
And sometimes, you get past it and you're in it, and you have to have that mentality. I am going to make this work. And that's probably why the franchisor approved you to begin with. But you have to, like, there has to be something that energizes you. And it's not always the widget. It's not always like the super cool stuff. I mean, Orange Theory is cool. I've never done it before. I'm actually getting ready to go do it. I live in the sticks. I mean, like, I'm looking outside.
They are there.
In Rapid City, South Dakota?
Yes, Orange Theory. You can find one about anywhere.
Well, I'm going to find one in Westminster, Colorado tomorrow morning. I will be there.
Why didn't you tell me? I'll come join you. It's actually one of my good friends is the franchisee there, and he's a great man.
Awesome. Well, another mutual friend that you and I both have hooked me up with a heart monitor because I can't go there without one of those. So we will touch base after the podcast so we can do a workout tomorrow.
Yeah, but they're not all that sexy, right? That's what you were saying.
No, they're not all that sexy. And that's not necessarily what energizes you. And a lot of people, they get into business or they start thinking about a business and they think sexy is what energizes them. At the end of the day, you need to ask yourself why, like 3 or 4 or 10 times to find out really why you want to get into a business, to see what energizes you about that. And usually it's the outcome of that business, whatever that is. And to get to that outcome, you're going to go through some pain. And I think, I look back on all the businesses that I've owned, there's always pain points, things that I looked and like, I didn't do enough due diligence on this. This is really hard. But then 2 years later, I'm like, that wasn't that hard. And that's what I have to continually remind myself as I'm helping people look at franchises, because what's hard to me now is really hard stuff. The little things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't even faze me anymore. And it phases some of my business partners in some of the fitness businesses that I'm involved with. They're like, Eric, what do you think? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not even concerned about that. Like, what do you mean? And they're like, okay, if you're not concerned about it, I'm not concerned about it. And then a week goes by and they're like, yeah, you were right, Eric. I didn't need to be concerned about it. But the point is, there's hard stuff that happens after you sign agreements, but you need to make sure that there's still a path to get to the goal that you want to go, where you want to go to. And sometimes that we all know in business, it's not just a straight line that gets you there. There's zigzags, there's ups and downs and different things, but you just need to make sure that the business is headed in the right direction. It might get you there faster. Like a lot of Orange Series got people there faster than they thought they would. There's a lot of other franchises that it takes, and this is the case with most, I think, it takes you longer to get to where you wanted to go. And that's just the reality of it. And I know in the early days of Orange Theory as well, it wasn't what it is today. And there was the zigzags and the ups and the downs. But I mean, look where it ended up. And it's just been a fantastic ride for those franchisees. I missed out on it and I'm really bummed about that.
Well, I think it will be hard. I think you have to go in knowing that there will be hard points, and through that, don't panic. And the stress is really when you let the stress get the best of you, that's when the trouble happens.
Yep. And most of that time happens when you are a new business owner. I mean, I look back at my time when I first started out, it was more stressful then, and that's okay. And there's downsides to that too, because just because I don't get as stressed out about it, there's some bad things that come along with that too, because I don't have quite the urgency that I used to have, and so it's give and take.
Yeah, when you're not clawing as much, that's a good place to be. But you got to claw a little to get there. Yeah, it's true. There was something in there that I was going to speak to, and I don't. I don't remember what it was.
Anything else about Discovery Day? As I look at, so I think this, just to kind of recap, and if there's any final things that you have on Discovery Day, let's get it here in a second. But just, to recap, Discovery Day really is the decision day, and just go into it and make sure you get that due diligence done. Pressure that franchisor, pressure the consultant to help you. I think as a consultant, putting them with brands is the easy part for me. I give them different brands to look at, and that's great, and that's not rocket science for me. Where I think I add the most value is when someone flips the switch. They're like, I'm starting to like this brand, Eric. And then they are like looking at Discovery Day. At that point is when I start to take a lot of notice, and I start to give them a lot of attention, because up to that point, my whole thing is like, what are people doing? I don't care what people are saying. What are they doing? Like, goes to your point of how quickly do they email you? So once they flip that switch and like, I'm thinking about a Discovery Day, they need to book their tickets within the next 2 weeks, or they're just talking. So they book their tickets, and that's when it's like, I know it's on. I know they need a lot of my help, and I'm Johnny on the spot with them. So, and that's where I think they need it, because they have to collapse timeframes and get all of that due diligence done quickly. And if you're asking the wrong questions, that due diligence will last forever. But if you're asking the right questions, and you know how to ask them and who to ask them to, then you can get a lot of information really quickly. So I think that's one of the things that I'm probably best at, is helping people once they flip that switch to like, I'm interested, I'm thinking about Discovery Day, to actually attending Discovery Day. After that, it's up to them, and it's interesting too, because some people they even think I'm trying to sell them, and they get really surprised when I'm not. But that's probably the best piece of advice that I can give someone is, don't get to Discovery Day thinking you're going to learn a whole lot new.
So it's just about feeling at Discovery Day.
Yeah, it's just confirming everything that you've learned up to that point. And if you're not getting confirmation of it, then you're going to have to dig deeper. And there's some things that are off, and it might be off in the franchise, but it might just be off in your own expectations or what you thought. Because when you're doing due diligence in a franchise, it's all just your expectations. And so you may be off, but it's probably you and the franchisor. There is that baseline of a franchisor. There's a baseline of revenue. There's a baseline of how easy it is, how hard it is. There is that baseline. It's your expectations, whether you're way above it or way below it, that you need to find out. And you're the one that is going to find that out through your research. And then at the end of the day, Discovery Day.
So there's some work that needs to be done before you go to Discovery Day. And the last thing, that I recommend to people, and something that I was so blessed to have, is grab a mentor. And whether that's a consultant or, another mentor. I was so blessed to have a really strong female mentor in franchising, and I think it really shifts the game, and it gives you somebody to bounce ideas off of and connect with, or just watch how they handle something, watch how they handle the stressors, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in mentoring as well. And it's interesting to today you can get so much mentoring just by podcasts and watching people and things like that. And then you actually get someone that you have that relationship with. That's another topic for another day, but yeah, I'm a huge believer in that and picking your mentors wisely. And I think probably the biggest thing with that is give value back to them. Like, just don't take, do whatever you can. Some of the people that are in my life today, and I see them as my mentor, they are always mentoring me without even trying, because I find myself asking more people like, how can I help you? What can I do for you?
Right.
So mentoring is a huge thing. That collapses timeframes. It helps you get to where you want to go much faster and with less pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you
for interviewing me.
Well, I felt like you deserved it for once.
Oh, thank you. And maybe I'll have you on the hot seat one of these days.
Okay, anytime. Thanks for the time, Eric.